I was chatting with a former Macy's colleague a few weeks ago, and she was telling me about the grandniece of one of our old colleagues who was sick. Her name was Rose Ramirez. Now, I never met Rosie, but as Debbie was sharing with me about her, I couldn't help but be drawn into the story of this 7-year-old with pediatric cancer. The family's Facebook page, Team Princess Rose, chronicles her struggles with neuroblastoma. Now, neuroblastoma is a cancer that develops from immature nerve cells in several areas of the body and most commonly affects children aged 5 or younger. Now, depending on the grouping of the tumors, the survival rate varies, but for serious cases, like Rosie's, it's around 50%. The Facebook page is full of updates of the adventures Rosie is having, both the ups and the downs that anyone with cancer understands all too well. While Rosie's story chronicles her journey with the disease, it's really not about that. It's about her infectious personality, her radiant smile, her indelible spirit. Her story is about courage, to not only go through the experience, but to do so with an enormous heart, focusing her energy on giving to others throughout her ordeal. Last Halloween, she and her family helped pack Halloween gift bags for the Ronald McDonald Houses of Orlando. She and her family have helped with the Orlando Highway Patrol blood drives. She was also inspired to do a fun Band-Aid drive for her hospital in honor of her birthday. Now, the quote on her Facebook page says, "Rosie gets a lot of shots, and it helps calm her down when she gets to pick out a fun Band-Aid for after her shot." When she was admitted recently, she received a shot but was bummed out when the nurse told her they only had normal Band-Aids. Now, the nurse told me that the hospital only has fun Band-Aids when they are donated. So we want to collect as many fun-looking Band-Aids as possible to give to the oncology floor. Now, through a call to action on her Team Princess Rose page, they received 2,046 donated boxes of Band-Aids, and that translates to 88,352 shots that now end with a fun Band-Aid. Now, this year for her birthday, Rosie championed the drive for fidget toys. You know those things that are all the rage that help calm down nervous people? Now, here's a girl with aggressive cancer, and not only is she fighting the disease, but doing so with a transcendent smile and giving of herself to others the whole time. Her desire was to make other kids who were suffering as she was feel better. At a time when her body was betraying her, she thought of easing the suffering of others. All that at just 7 years old. After her birthday this year, things took a turn, as they often do with terminal illness. The time came to move Rosie to hospice, which provided its own heartaches and struggles. But as was Rosie's wish, she was home now. Her mother writes, "We have continuous hospice nurses at the house now. Rosie overall had an okay night. She threw up twice. She grabbed her head 4 times in pain last night, and that's what upsets me the most. She looked peaceful most of yesterday afternoon and night. I snapped this picture last night. Her breathing has decreased to 7 to 9 breaths a minute, but she's still breathing, proving all the doctors wrong. She is a tough cookie." On Wednesday, April 13th of this year, Rosie Marjorie Ramirez lost her battle with pancreatic cancer. In a speech given at Rosie's funeral, Jordan Bellis, founder of Wimped Pediatric Cancer, said, "Despite being handed a card that most don't want to be dealt, she made every day matter. And she made every day count. She told the people she loved them whenever she had the chance. She was always giving hugs and spreading Rosie love to anyone and everyone she met. Not all heroes wear capes. I have to say my hero wore a tiara and a dress." Would you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be elevated in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Now, I share Rosie's story with you this morning because I see hope in it. I share Rosie's story with you this morning because I see service in it. I share Rosie's story with you this morning because in spite of a painful, life-altering, ultimately life-ending disease, Rosie's spirit shone through. Her light shone brightly during her life. And her life continues to shine brightly with you this morning as you hear about her journey. Does hearing her story stir something within you? My hope is that it does. My hope is that her bright light might rouse the same spark within you that animated her. My hope is that you will be inspired to loose the yoke of those things in your life that keep you from shining as Rosie shone, and you are free then to make an impact on the world. My hope is that you're inspired to get off our collective fannies, to quote my grandmother, and bring our spirit, our energy, our gifts to the Lord. He has need of them. The world has need of them. Now, we're playing with metaphor today because, well, I can. Our gospel finds Jesus preparing for the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, which begins the countdown to his death. He knows what's coming, and he's mentioned it many times in the preceding weeks to those who are closest to him. Yet, bound by their own belief systems, they could not or would not hear what Jesus was saying. So Jesus sends them on an errand to find transportation. More modern translations say donkey versus ass because, well, I'm pretty sure teenage boys, both physically and mentally, giggled in church every time the priest said ass. So, let's throw that out there. Regardless, donkey or ass, we're all encouraged through the power of metaphor to loose ours and bring them to the Lord, for he has need of them. Now, in the Bible, donkeys are illustrated as humble creatures. Most references to donkeys in the Old Testament also use them as metaphors for peace or intellectual power. Biblical donkeys are animals that help humans and literally and figuratively bring them hope mounted upon them. Our modern donkey is descended from Equus africanus, or the African wild ass. Now, they're not easily startled and have a keen sense of curiosity. Donkeys have a reputation for stubbornness, but this is due to their highly developed sense of self-preservation. Donkeys are more independent thinking than horses and will reason and then make decisions based upon their safety. No matter how much their human pushes them, they will simply ignore this and listen to their instincts. Some people say that donkeys possess a sixth sense. Now, this is because their funnel-shaped ears, enormous ears, can detect different sounds and donkeys far away. Being compared to a donkey can be an asset, or we can be off by 2 letters. Historically, when people have called me an ass, which I know you find very hard to believe, actually you probably think it happens more often than not, I didn't see that as a compliment. But in light of today's metaphor, I'm inspired by that label. Now, as we just heard, donkeys are intelligent. They listen well. They reason. They have a keen sense of curiosity and almost a sixth sense. They are symbols of selflessness and service, bearers of hope and good news. Does that remind you of anything? A calling, perhaps? I mean, the sermon just writes itself. Spirit of Hope, today we stand at the magical place of new beginnings. Next week, we honor Jeff and his many years of ministry, and in 2 weeks, we welcome Luke and his family to our ministry. The most recent chapter is coming to an end, and as we prepare to turn the page and start a new chapter in the history of Spirit of Hope, how are you feeling? Are you feeling tied up in uncertainty? Still tangled in that COVID-woven web? Wrapped in a world of skyrocketing prices, supply chain-driven shortages, and here we are faced with another change in a constantly changing world. How are you feeling? Excited? Sad? Nervous? Scared? Uncertain? Perhaps you feel tied up in fear, separation, or loneliness, and sometimes it all just seems too much. And then there's the call. What the? Unknown. All right. Hello? Who is this? Jesus, Jesus, Jesus the gardener? Not Jesus the gardener. Jesus? The Jesus? Well, hey girl, hey. What's going on? You want me to what? Come again? Untie my what? Because what? Bring it where? Because why? Untie it and bring it to you because you have need of it? I should tell everyone here to do the same thing, to untie theirs too. You need us all? And we should bring our friends? Okay, I'll tell them, but I think that's going to go over like a you-know-what and a you-know-where. All right, thank you. Well, apparently that was Jesus. And he's got work for us to do. Get this. He says we should examine ourselves in light of the donkey metaphor and loose those things that hold us back from our calling, holding us back from being followers of the way of Christ in the world. The world has need of us, each of us, right now. Now, don't worry, I told him that wasn't such a great idea. I mean, isn't the world just a little too dangerous now? Shouldn't we just sit here all nice and quiet and not create any new waves? Maybe be like the donkey in their self-preservation mode. I mean, that is also part of being a donkey, like, right? Shouldn't we do that instead? Yeah, we should do that instead. Technically, following his instructions about being a donkey. Except for that part about untying it. I mean, if we're working with a metaphor, shouldn't we work with the whole metaphor? We probably should look at those things that keep us in our comfort zones, keep us from being engaged as catalysts for change, keep us from doing some deep self-examination to figure out how to release our gifts and release our lives to do better work for this world. You know, I think that's the most challenging part of being a follower of Christ, that deep self-examination, the kind of introspection that brings up all of our deepest fears, core fears, and calls us to heal them. I mean, think about that. All the parables in the Bible, they're most certainly not do what you've always been doing stories, are they? Something fundamental to the recipient's way of life or actions are called into question, and the suggestion is given to change. The rich ruler who was told to sell all he owned and distribute the money, or Peter and Andrew who needed to give up their jobs as fishermen to become fishers of men and women. Or perhaps any of the Pharisees and the lessons that they were taught. The lessons are always a call to look inside, to examine yourself, and you're invited to make a change. But looking deep into ourselves and examining our issues is not fun. I hate it. But isn't that work? The point of this? Isn't that what is supposed to happen here? Don't we gather here each week to gain insight on how to live our lives in the world with instructions from the divine? Let's look at this world too. I mean, is this the world we want? Are we content with allowing our waters, food, and air to be polluted? Are we willing to let profit trump fair living wages? Are we willing to stand up to powerful coalitions and say we want the killing of our kids to stop? Are we willing to stand up to the egomaniacs in the world and end wars before they escalate into world wars we cannot bounce back from? Are we willing to do what it takes to ensure we end the double standards in our criminal justice system and champion the causes of our BIPOC sisters and brothers? Is that the world we want? Oh, I know. Conversation just got uncomfortable. Good. It should. I think the calling of the Christ is to change the status quo for the better. And that can be uncomfortable. I think we are the hands and feet of God at this time. When the Holy Spirit came down on Pentecost, it came down to empower us to do the work, to create the world we want to see. The call really is like that telephone call. We're called to unbind our fears, the self-made blocks, and to do something. But to do that, we really need to get out of the way and let the God inside us be released to do its work in the world. And one of my favorite passages that never seems to make it to the lectionaries in the weeks that I'm preaching is Psalm 82, verse 6. You are God's. children of the Most High. All of you. What does that mean? Well, it's a reminder that we are all part of God. And if we're part of God, part of the power that creates worlds, we need to decide for ourselves what this world is and should be. Did you know that you're powerful creators, created in the image of God, put on this planet with a very sliver of source itself, we call that a soul, to do just that, to create? To do that, it might be beneficial to embrace today's metaphor, loosening ourselves from those things that prevent us from shining as the creators that we are. It would benefit us to release our fears, our excuses, our desires to blame others for allowing a world we don't want to live in, and getting out our metaphorical donkeys out of the way and into action to create the world we want to see. A world where we respect each other's opinions no matter how stupid they are. A world where different ways of looking and doing at things are just seen as threads, one single string weaving together a beautiful tapestry, varied in color and texture and exciting to behold. A world where basic human rights are honored and supported, where everyone is allowed and encouraged to be their highest self boldly and unashamedly. Whew. Now, that's a tall order, isn't it? You might be thinking, well, that's completely overwhelming. I cannot possibly do that, much less alone. Yeah, it is overwhelming to think about doing it alone, but guess what? You're not alone. Look around you. Okay, well, it may not work at home if you're sitting by yourself, but metaphorically look around you. This place, Spirit of Hope, is a place where we can gather to do just that. We can gather to be inspired to answer to our highest call. We can gather in community to support one another. We can gather as like-minded collection of individuals joining together to do our work in the world. In fact, we do just that, and that's good. And we need to keep doing that. We need to do more of that. We need to invite our friends and neighbors, heck, even complete strangers to join us to doing more of that. As we transition over the next few weeks, saying goodbye to Jeff as senior pastor and welcoming Luke as senior pastor, I want to remind us that they are not the ministries of Spirit of Hope. We are the ministry of Spirit of Hope. It is we who are the ministers called by source to go and do our work in the world. Our leaders, they're just here to help guide us on that journey. Now, you can Google any number of studies right now that talks about why people are falling away from the church. Some cite inflexible dogma that doesn't match real-world experiences. Some cite a do as I say, not as I do attitude in the congregation. And some cite a too conservative lean in the theology practiced in that church. And let's all be honest, who doesn't love a Sunday morning when you can sleep in, right? And do we really need to come here to connect with God? No, you really don't need to come here to connect with God. You want to connect with God? Go to your garden. Take a hike through a forest. Go to a beach. You do not need a church to connect to God. You do need a church to remind you in the challenge of your daily life, you're not alone. There's a better way. You do need a church to lift you up when life throws you a bunch of curveballs and you're feeling defeated. You do need a church to multiply your ability to do good in the world. As Jesus said, where two or more are gathered, well, that's just basic math. And is there a cooler place to be than here at Spirit of Hope United Methodist Church? We're open-minded, welcoming, affirming, creative, talented, and passionate. We have a wonderful sense of humor, even if our jokes aren't funny. We care deeply about each other, and we care deeply about our faith. Shouldn't we invite the world to be part of that? Shouldn't we invite the world to join us in creating the world that we all want to see? We should tell people about this place and invite them here, either in person or through our online ministry. We should invite them to a place where all are encouraged to get over their fear of whatever they might think and walk the path of Christ. We should want to invite them to a place where we look deeply and honestly at ourselves and our world and work with each other to destroy the myths of doubt, shame, guilt, and separation. where we come as all unique threads and enhance that tapestry that is the life and history of Spirit of Hope, where we each help each other loose the things that keep each other bound and help each other find their fullness in love and grace. Now, you can start doing that today. Think about how you can help this body. First of all, you can tell someone about this exciting ministry. The easiest way is to share the link to our Sunday services on your social media. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Invite them to a service. They'll meet some great people. They'll hear some beautiful music, and they may even hear a cool message that inspires them to be all that they are called to be. Then, you can examine your hearts and your gifts and find a place here to actively use them in the work of the church. Remember, we are the church alive. Not Jeff is the church alive, or Luke is the church alive, or Susan is the church alive. We, all of us, get involved. We have needs in all areas of ministry. We talked this morning about joining Hearts and Hammers and leading people in that powerful ministry. Or join the tech team and help broadcast this worship service around the country or around the world. Or perhaps ask Chad if you can get involved in the youth ministry. There are ways to get involved that are only limited by your imagination. Remember, we are the hands and feet of God. Then lastly, pray for the work of the church. Focus your energy, love, good vibrations to the work of this body. Where two or more are gathered also applies to where two or more are focused. Now, if this all seems a bit much, think back to Rosie. In her way, through an unimaginable situation, she found her way to loose the ropes that could have bound her and kept her from giving back to the world. Instead, she chose to spread her light to the world. So come on, church. Loose it. The Lord has need of you. Amen.